Awesome, man. This is cool stuff. One of the things, guys, and thanks everybody for chiming in. Kim, let everybody on social media know we got it rolling now. So I know we had a lot of people coming on. Um, you know, the biggest thing, and I love taking a look at this and taking a look at the mapping. Um, and what we asked Tyler to help us put together here, we're going to show some different things from spring. We're getting into summer. We're getting into my favorite time of the year, guys. Absolutely love this time of year, post spawn. But right now, a lot of things are happening with the shad spawn. You know, we just left Kentucky Lake. In congratulations to Wesley Strader, a good friend of mine, won that event. And we're getting into the time of year where fish are really going to start moving, but you've always got to take in consideration of where they've been. If you guys will look on the right side of the screen here, you're going to see some major flats. And anytime when I open my Navionics mapping and I'm checking in what's going on, I really want to key in on these big flats. And I'm even going to take it a step further, guys. I'm going to look for. I'm going to zoom out and find the biggest flats in the lake. I'm going to give you guys some examples of some different lakes throughout the country. You know, if you're on Sam Rayburn, you're talking about, the Black Forest area. You're talking about the Beach Basin area, the canyons. All of those areas have major flats. If you're on Lake Gunnersville, you're talking about the Goose Pond area, the flats out at the mouth of Browns Creek. These major spawning flats are where the biggest populations on the lake are going to be. And as we take a look here on the right-hand side, you can see these major flats, these big-time flats. The rest of this has got some really tight contours to it. One of the biggest things I love about the Navionics mapping is how the detailed is and how tight these lines are going to come in. Now, one thing that I like to look for is these drains. As you can see this major flat on the right-hand side, right in the center of it, you've got a drain coming in up on this pocket here. And following those drains in is where those bass are going to migrate as well. They're going to come in and they're going to set up in the bushes and the cover closest to those drains. Once they get shallow and they get into spawning habitat, they're not going to travel real far. You know, they're moving in to do one thing, and that's to spawn. Now, one thing that you've got to have is you've got to have protected areas. You can see this island here is going to protect a lot from wind. It's also going to, give some protection in this little cove here. One thing that I always do, I take every wind in a given lake and I take a look at the setup and what's going on. And you've got to think these bedding areas have got to be protected. So when you're going out and looking for these places, that's another thing to keep in mind. This is where I'll really zoom around on my Raymarine unit and really look all over trying to find these different spawning areas on my Navionics mapping. Or we're going to move into summer here, as we're going to go on to the next slide. We may have a few more. Let's leave this one up here. This is pretty cool. This is on Lake Wheeler. And you can see, now there's different things. You got to take the Tennessee River into aspect. It's going to be different from, say, Table Rock Lake or Bull Shoals Lake in Missouri. These systems are going to be different because you got current flow and you've got different water clarity. Now, some of these fish are going to be able to spawn out on the main lake if there's enough water clarity. Now, what I mean by that is let me X out of something here. Now, what I mean by that, if you've got a situation where you've got a lot of visibility, guys, I've caught them on the bed at say, Lake Amistad in Texas in 15 foot of water before. Those fish can spawn out more out in the main lake, but not fish in more of a stained water lake. Lake Fork, Lake Falcon, you get on into Alabama, Wheeler, Rodman Reservoir in Mississippi, those type places, those fish are going to need protection and they're going to be close to some cover as well. I'm going to leave this up because this slide up for just a second because I want to show you guys something about summertime and where fish are going to get and related to the shad spawn. We're into this time of year and something that happens when the shad start spawning, to them, it's not really about protection. It's more about availability to shallow water. If you see just about in the dead center of this slide here, this area called hazard, where it says there's a hazard area. And you can see the current, exactly right in here. And guys, and you can see the current flow is going to be coming downstream on Wheeler Lake. These areas where it's really shallow, and I set my shaded depth on my Navionics mapping according to what I want to look for. So if I'm looking for shad spawn, I'm going to set my shaded depth to be 5 foot or less to have the dark blue shaded area, which is what you're going to have here in this hazard area. And these shad are going to spawn up on these shallow bars. They were doing it at Kentucky Lake when we were there last week. They're going to get in the rocky areas. And anytime, guys, where you have contours that are this tight that come up on shallow water, as this one does right here, you're going to have rock. That's where those shale beds are going to be. If you get up more to the about 1 o'clock position here, you see a big flat, and the contours are just not tight. Everything up in this area right here, the contours are not tight. It becomes shallow out to deep, but it takes a long time for that to happen. That's going to be more of a sandy, mucky bottom. That's not where the shad are going to spawn. They're going to be where these contours are really tight. Even over here on the far right, you can see another one on an island over here, an underwater island, underwater hump, exactly where the contours are really tight and it comes up on a shallow area. Guys, that's always going to be rock. If you think about the Tennessee River and how long it's been impounded and how many times these floodgates get on, for these shallow bars to still exist the way they do with those types of tight contour, that tells you that's going to be rock. That's where you want to be out early, guys. This time of year when the shad are spawning, and it's happening from Rayburn to Lake Eufaula up into the Carolinas, it's going to happen early in the morning. They spawn at night, and you're going to have a window of about 2 hours that goes on every morning with the shad spawn, and that's where these fish are going to be. You're going to find the best fishing for the first 2 hours of each morning. And my favorite thing to do, guys, is throw a spinnerbait. We have a spinnerbait that I like. It's called a shad spawn spinnerbait. And it has, no matter what kind you use, make sure you're using small number 4 blades. It's funny, I actually tell people this is the legal way to fish an Alabama rig in tournaments, because you're actually creating that scenario. Those shad are coming in and they're following that spinnerbait and running up and popping it. And it's just a really, really cool way to catch them this time of year. Now, if you have water willows, like you're on the Coosa River, Lay Lake, Neely Henry Lake, and you have vegetation, like I know at Rayburn, there's a lot of hay grass right now, and the shad spawn is probably finishing up at Rayburn, but maybe still going on a little bit. Same thing at Toledo Bend. Those shad are going to spawn around that hay grass, but they're going to start getting more main river this time of year. They start really getting out as close as they can to the main river when they're starting to spawn, and that's where those big schools are going to be. All right, let's go on to the next slide here and take a look. Man, this is one of my favorite places, Guntersville, Alabama. We're getting into more of the summer months. Man, I'm going to tell you, you really have to take what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks. You really have to take these corners into consideration on these main river ledges, and always consider the current flow. Now, what we're looking here is a section of Guntersville, and Guntersville flows a little bit different. It flows from south to north and then turns and goes from east to west and then slightly back up north again when you get past Browns Creek. But always take the current flow into consideration and look for these main ledges that's going to have little hooks and little corners. If you look up into the very top right of this map here, there's where it says bird sanctuary, fish attractor there. Just over to the right of that, you're going to see a little cut into the main river ledge. And about right here, exactly right here where that green buoy is, just downstream below it, only, on your map, it ain't even a centimeter there of what you're looking at. But right there, exactly, there's a little corner. And guys, I cannot tell you enough how these corners are everything when it comes to current flow and where these fish are going to set up. It's, when I do a lot of seminars and stuff, and I show the illustration to folks, and I say, okay, I'm going to lay this table out, and I'm going to hold my fist as if it's this table. And I've got the ice cream truck driving through the neighborhood, if you guys hear that outside here. But the kids, if they were here, which they're not right now, they'd be running out to the ice cream truck. But anyway, if I've got current flow and it's hitting this underwater hump, which is my fist illustrating for you guys, and it hits that hump and the water comes over and flows back off, a lot of people think the bass are going to sit in this area back here where my knuckles are. But they're actually going to sit right here in the front. And I do this illustration, I tell it like this. It's almost like fish in a sports car in a wind tunnel. You never see that wind hitting the car. It's always just slightly up off of it. And right here at the front of it is where those fish are going to, they're going to relate, and they're going to get on those corners just like what we have here. Now, granted, I'm always going to take the biggest flats and get out from there. As you can see, this big creek on the bottom here, we're taking a look at this big, huge spawning flat, South Saudi here, one of my favorite areas. And these fish are going to use it as highway. It's pretty cool here. We've got the buoys marked going out this channel. Exactly right here where you can see them. And let's move up just north of there, about 1 o'clock. You can see this strong turn right here, exactly, this strong bend in the river channel right there. Those are the top places that I want to look for. Because think about, I always look at it like this, guys. You think about how water flows. We all waded creeks when we were young. At least I did. It's still something I love to do, get out in the creeks and wade. But all of those turns, all of those bends were always the best pools, because that was the rocky area. That's where it made a turn. You had more of a contour, a little bit of a deeper edge. Okay, when they dam these major reservoirs up, these creeks like South Saudi coming out here is an example that you can take and look in a bigger picture, just like what you do with wading a creek when you were younger, or if it's something you still like to do. Those scenarios are where the contour is going to be right. The avionics mapping shows it great here. And those are the places that you want to key on. When you go to eliminating all of these unproductive areas and get to where you can find them, and then you go down to Town Creek and you find a scenario just like this one here at South Saudi, or you run up to Mink Creek just north of here and you find the exact same area, that's really what you want to look for. Now, these fish are going to stay out in the summer months, all through the early fall, October, November. Here where I live on the Tennessee River, you know, it's a little bit different up north, or even in the Midwest and some of the highland reservoirs. But you take Table Rock Lake, and this is something relative that I tell people. You can go up into the stained part of Table Rock Lake, you know, up around Cape Fair, or even up to Kings, the White River, the James River, any of those places, and you're going to be able to find fish offshore on the structure. But everything is relative so much to water clarity and to how deep these fish are going to be. Every lake's different. You know, I know people maybe listen to this seminar that fish, you know, Ross Barnett a lot in different places like that. So those fish are going to be more cover related and things like that. All right, let's get into the fall. I know we got several people on here. We're going to have some questions here in a little bit. Let's hold on to this one just a second. I want to take a look at this a little bit more here and see what we can find from summertime. And this is another cool deal with this channel coming down and making a strong bend, you know, against the bank over here. Those are some of the places you want to look for, exactly right in there. Channel swings, channel bends are always a really big deal, but really taking this and when you get out on the lake and zooming in on your units and really getting it dialed in, I'm gonna tell you, there's nothing like, I would be so lost if I got out and my avionics was not, or I didn't have it with me, or for some reason wasn't working. Man, it's just to think about the technology we have, you know, at our disposal now, to be able to go out, and used to, we got paper maps, we're folding them around, we're taking them out, taking a look at where we are, trying to get a lineup, and guys, this stuff's just incredible. If you don't have it, you got to go check it out. It's just some of the most amazing technology that will make your fishing so much easier. All right, let's get into the fall a little bit here. I want to talk to you guys about channels and migration routes. And this is a great example right here of what to look for. I can take this. We're going to start out on the northern part of this map here on the northern right area. And you see this big long point coming out here, right here off of this flat, exactly, coming up, and then it just shoots out into the lake. And one of the things that I like to think about is where they've been in the summertime and where they're going to move to and where they're going to be. You know, but you got to think about shad like this. They're going to get in that cooler water. They go deep in the summertime because there's more oxygen content. It's a lot cooler. And then they're going to get in that cooler water when you start getting into the fall. So what's going to happen? They're going to come up to the surface. And if you notice, if you ever go into, say, a Bass Pro Shops aquarium or into Cabela's store, wherever, and you're in an aquarium, look at this. If they have shad in there that haven't been eaten yet, they're swimming. It's just like the white bass or the stripers. They're always swimming. They're always moving. And they have to filter. They have to breathe to survive. So when they come up to the surface and they go to the swimming, it's not necessarily they want to get into the backs of the coves. They get into the backs of the coves because they just get hemmed up back there. It's just like if these automated vacuum cleaners that you may plug up in your house, they're going to eventually kind of get stuck in a corner. It's just the way things happen that are moving constantly. That's why the backs of the coves and the backs of the creeks are always better. But you're also going to want to find the migration routes of where the bass have been, and then follow them back into those pockets. And this one has several of them here. You can even transcend this to look into one map here of looking at some shad spawn stuff that we talked about from the screen, from the shad spawn we talked about in the earlier screen that was up there, and also some of the summertime where some of the swings are coming in on these points. But this is just a great example of what I want to look for in the fall. And then as we get into the wintertime, if we got another slide here, I believe that we're going to, let's hold this one up. Here's another one from the fall. This is a great example. Look at this cove coming down in the center of the stream, going from north to south. It's got the boat docks on the right-hand side there. This is a great example of some of the coves that will really get the shad locked up in the back of it. They're long, they're narrow. The shad go to swimming. As you can think, the shad that kind of were swimming around that came into this bottleneck and came on down into the back of this pocket here, they're going to really get hemmed up back in there, and that's the places they're going to look for. Now, looking at this map here on Lake Lanier, a lot of these points, you start getting some wind-blown areas in the fall of the year. This same pocket, let's go up just a hair and look at this red buoy right here on this point, exactly right here that comes out. If you think about the wind coming in and all of the shad that's swimming around on the surface, and they're really getting pushed in on some of these main lake points, that's a high percentage area that I want to look at. Then I want to come on into the pocket and look at where shad are getting pushed in as well. Guys, when you're looking into the fall, heading into the winter, the bass can't swim as well. They really start getting the cold water. Their metabolism slows down. They're not as strong swimmers, so they're really going to get pushed into the area by the wind. And in the fall of the year is really a time you want to fish the wind. And I want to use this slide, even though we've got fall written on it here, to talk about some of the wintertime stuff as well. You got to think about shad and their inability to be able to swim. All right, if you go just a little bit to the about 7 o'clock position of this big wide cove here from the one we were just in, on down right here, this big cove right here. This is a prime area. You can see you've got a really deep channel coming in, 70 foot at the mouth of it, all the way into 43, 35. Man, love the tight contours. You're talking about absolutely every little line on here. But guys, this is the kind of cove that these shad and the blueback herring that are on Lake Lanier are going to come into in the wintertime, from the fall transition into the wintertime, because they're not going to want to sit up there and fight that current. And you may think, well, hey, Lanier doesn't have the type current the Tennessee River does. Guys, there's still wind current that happens every day. And the further they can get back up into these drains and into these creeks, and it's not necessarily major tributaries. I mean, we're talking big coves and big pockets that have depths in them, just like this one here does. And that's when you can take those underspins and things like that and just really hammer them. You're always got to be cognizant. Places like Lake Okeechobee are different. You're talking about crayfish and shiners and bluegill that a lot of the bass are leading on. But mapping is still so important in those places to be able to see the least bit of contour change. Same thing up on the Thousand Islands region in New York, anywhere those gobies are up there, and being able to, no matter what the forage is, being able to follow them around and see what's happening there. Man, it's pretty cool. All participants have stayed put with us, man. So it's pretty good. Hey, Tyler, let's take some questions. Let's hear from everybody. Some of my questions, we'll fill them in with some answers too, guys. So I love that, and we get pretty detailed with them. Let me know where you're from too on these questions. That's some cool stuff. So go ahead, Tyler.
Okay, so John wants to know, what is a drain?
John, it's funny, if we're in Texas, they're going to call them drains. If we're here in Alabama, they probably call them a creek. But you can see this right where we looked at on this map a while ago, this big, huge flat on the bottom left there. Let's see, right here. This entire deep area coming in is a drain. Now, you got to take into consideration, like in Texas on Rayburn and Toledo Bend, they don't have the mountainous areas that say this area of Lanier does, or Table Rock Lake. You're going to see more flat areas, and that's where those creek channels are going to come in. And some people call them drains as well, but they're just phenomenal. It's not like what you're going to see, a drain up on the bank with a little bit of water flowing in. We're actually talking about a major cut that goes through a big flat. So that's what we're talking about on a drain. Good question there, John.
Perfect. Stephen actually had the same question, so that's good. So we've got two people wondering what that is. So moving on, we have Randall from Central Texas, and he says the bass are post-spawn. Mm-hmm. Part of the lake is 50 feet. And how deep are the ledges that you would fish?
Well, everything is on water clarity there, Randall. Definitely post-spawn, the fish are starting to get out. They're even going to move out deeper after the shad spawn is still going on. Guys, there's certain elements that will keep the fish shallow on the post-spawn. If the shad spawn lingers and stays strong, the fish are going to stay shallower there. Now, they will continue to move on out into the evenings. Even on the same day, at Lake Guntersville, I've caught them in 2 foot of water on the shad spawn in the morning. And then, caught different fish that had already moved out. And really, the spawn is relative. You hear so many people talk about the spawn and what's happening, and it will last for months, guys. And you'll have fish that are actually, like, I can go out on Pig Week, my home lake here tomorrow, and I can find fish that have not spawned yet. I can find the majority have spawned, obviously, and find some that are still spawning. So that goes on for months. But I would look for those. I almost take the consideration of, I cut on my units, I idle around, taking a look at the depth finder there and seeing what depth I start seeing that activity. And whatever depth I'm seeing that activity is the depth that I'm really going to look for those bass at. The clearer the water, the deeper they're going to be on those ledges. Central Texas, I'll give you some examples. I'm going to take you over to East Texas for a second, but for example, on Sam Rayburn, if you get up above the bridges, up above the canyons, those ledges, those fish are going to be a lot shallower than the ones, down around Needmore Point and some of the clear water areas. So water clarity really dictates that, John.
Cool. Good question. So Scott, actually, he's from Scott. First, I want to say thank you for, your TV show. He's from New Jersey. And then he says, do you look for the same type of bends and channels on the upper Chesapeake where it's pretty much shallow all the way across the bay?
Yeah, it's a great question, Scott. Thank you for watching the show too. Hey, the upper Chesapeake is a little bit different in the fact that most tidal systems are the same. And a lot of fish are really target oriented in those tidal systems. Like on the upper Chesapeake, the docks and the marinas are so good. The grass flats are so good. But when you find those little subtle places, they can be gold mines. And it really is relative to the salinity that comes in on those tidal rivers and how much they will get offshore. I know the very first Bassmaster event that I ever won was on the Potomac River, and it was an offshore rock pile that only had about a 2 foot depth change. But I think, the composition there of the bottom was the biggest key, probably more so than drops or ledges and things like that. Now, one thing that I really use my navionics with in those tidal systems, though, is finding those steeper banks, because I like to find where those fish can move up and down on a 2 foot tide and be able to catch them on the same areas. If I have a place that's really flat and the tide falls out, those fish are going to move a couple of 100 yards. If I have a really steep bank or a bank that has at least a 2 or 3 foot drop to it pretty quickly, those fish are going to hold pretty close.
Cool. That's good. And we have a question from Steven from Connecticut. What about the Northeast where we don't have a shad spawn, he says?
Yeah, it's a great question. You still got to concentrate on the forage. A lot of the minnows that are up there, the brim, the perch is such a big deal up there. When you get up around the Great Lakes, and even at Oneida, the gobies are in there now. The gobies are such a huge ordeal. You just got to move out to where the fish are. They do get out a little bit quicker up north because the water clarity is so clear. In most places they are. And I tell people all the time, guys, a lot of people watching this seminar, a lot of folks in bass clubs that like to travel and go different places. The Northeast is some of the most amazing fishing that you will find in the entire U.S. I love going up there, but concentrating probably more on crayfish and the gobies and minnows and just following it. And what we have here with the shad spawn is such a manic event, guys. It's hard to explain. You literally have to be on it for the first hour, and it really dictates a lot of different things that happen. But it is different in the Northeast without it. Sorry about that.
Okay. So John from
You got me some.
Harvest, Alabama, he said, will the bass set up the same in grass lakes like Guntersville?
Yes, they will. Grass, now you'll have the shad spawn will be a little bit different in the grass lakes because they actually spawn in the hydrilla and the milfoil and different things like that. So they are, and they'll actually, thank you, darling, they actually will move out a little bit later, and some of them will not move out at all because of the vegetation that's there. So it definitely makes it different. It makes the shad spawn different, but they're still going to get on those high places. They're still going to get around the grass and the vegetation. Guntersville is one of the few places that you can win so many different ways on into the summertime, which is what we're coming up on here in the Southeast. You'll have a guy catch a 25-pound bag flipping grass at 5 foot of water, and then you'll have another guy have a 25-pound bag out deep on the ledges on a Z-Boss 20 or something. So it really is relative to what the fish are doing.
Cool. So we have another question. It's again similar to the other one about Upper Chesapeake and the Potomac, but do you catch most of them off of flats or points where the contour drops off?
Oh man, I'm gonna tell you, when you find them on those flats at the Upper Chesapeake and the Potomac, it's absolutely amazing at the amount of fish that you can find. But that's another place similar to the question I just answered on Lake Guntersville. It can be very diverse there. I have found just absolutely wonderful fishing on points where the current's coming out and there'll be one log set up. But to me, the biggest thing about the Chesapeake and the Potomac, it's cover oriented, throwing at targets, whether it's lily pads, some kind of cover like that on the Potomac, the hydrilla and the milfoil that grow. I remember finding a school of fish up at Piscataway one year on the Potomac, up around that hydrilla, that was just amazing when it got low tide at the fish that was there. In the Chesapeake, the same way, just some of the best dock fishing you will ever find there on the Upper Chesapeake. But I'm gonna tell you, when I went there, the thing about the Upper Chesapeake that's neat to me is the water clarity is clear enough that those fish will get offshore. I found a couple of places last time we were there, but I'm gonna concentrate on that a whole lot more this time. It really intrigued me by how healthy that fishery is, the size of the bass. I mean, 4 or 5 pounders, just common as they can be, and it has the population to find them offshore. You really have to find a body of water that has the kind of population to be able to find them like that, and those two do. But I really can't answer the flats versus the points, because both of those scenarios can be phenomenal on those two fisheries.
Perfect. One more northern question is Tim from Michigan. He said he wants to compare your process between southern reservoirs to natural lakes, because natural lakes don't have much current or channels.
Yeah, great point there, Tim. Hey, I love Michigan. Spent a lot of time filming in Alpena, Michigan this past year. We always wondered how a guy from Kalamazoo was so good in our sport and learned it all, but fishing is phenomenal up there. I still take, I probably get into fishing cover quicker in northern lakes, especially if I'm targeting largemouth. The smallmouth is a little bit different. The smallmouth is similar here to what we have trying to fish in the south. You're still looking for those deep contour lines, going up against those shallow bars, those gravel areas when fishing for smallmouth in Michigan. With the largemouth up there, it's all about the cover. Finding the cover, whether it's the vegetation or whatever it may be. And when you're looking at, you're talking about two different things in Michigan. You're either talking about fishing the Great Lakes, which is completely surrounded. I believe the state of Michigan has as much waterfront as the entire eastern seaboard. That's pretty cool there. But you're taking the gobies and everything into consideration with the deep Great Lakes, and then all of the inland lakes, whether it's Mullet or the smaller lakes around Traverse City, up around Alpena, all of those areas. I'm basically targeting cover, but I'm still looking for the biggest flats on the lakes, even though they're natural lakes and not dammed up reservoirs. That's still what I want to look for.
Perfect. Kevin wants to know about Lake Fork, Texas, and if you fish shell beds there.
Lake Fork, Texas. Kevin, I have fished Fork several times. I have not fished shell beds that I know of. When we've been there, it's been more of a pre-spawn deal. Shell beds are a huge ordeal, though. I really, man, oh my goodness. I found some on Kentucky Lake a few weeks ago that the bass were not out on yet, but I know this FLW coming up, if the guys find them, they're going to absolutely smoke them. Because they were just now starting to get to that. I know the last day I caught a couple on the Z-Boss 20 out on some, but and the size was right, man. I hit a school where I caught 2 3s and lost an 8. There's a unique thing about shells that doesn't get talked about a whole lot, and in the secretion that the shells do when they're filtering brings in the big shad, and people don't realize shells move. You know, they have a foot, they can drag themselves around, they can move, and they actually move with the water temperature. You know, they'll be shallower this time of year as they're trying to spawn, just like the bass and everything else, and they move out deeper on into the summertime. I spend a lot of my time hunting shell beds. They're magical. They're really amazing, but I have not fished them there in Texas. I sure haven't.
Okay, we got Avery from Alabama. What variables do you look for when targeting different species, you know, largemouth, smallmouth, and spotted bass? How they're all different?
Yeah, good question, Avery. War Eagle. I don't know if probably a Roll Tide fan from Alabama, but I'm gonna give him a War Eagle anyway. You know, I think first of all, the spawn. You know, they spawn different. A spotted bass really likes clay. A largemouth really likes sand. A smallmouth likes more pea gravel, more chunk rock areas. But I think the biggest thing to look for, not just bottom composition, but what they relate to. Largemouth are target-oriented creatures in most, you know, reservoirs. The Tennessee River and the Chattahoochee River, there are exceptions as they get on the ledge. It's real strong there. The smallmouth, obviously in Alabama, we're talking about the Tennessee River, Pickwick Lake. There are some in the Bear Creek reservoirs as well. But those fish are going to be related to current. You're going to catch them in the main river, as opposed to, you know, the largemouth are going to get in the pockets and in the bays in the fall and the spring. But that would be my scenario. And then the spotted bass, if you have a lake that has spotted bass in it, and they're just aggressive creatures. You know, I really, you know, getting into the bright colors is important, like the chartreuse pepper on the plastics and things like that with the spotted bass. So.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and let's jump to the winter. Let's do those last 2 slides.
Yeah, let's take a look at that. All right.
Okay. So good questions, everybody. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, talking about in the wintertime, guys, again, we talked about the drains and some of these fish are going to move. They're going to get out on these main ridges, but they are going to get out of the current. You can see the Hughes Creek over here to the right. A lot of these fish are going to be moving up into these creeks, but just slightly out into the mouth of it. They like to get to the current, but not in it. So right here where you see Hughes and this hump coming up in the 17, 19-foot range, those are the tight places I really want to look for them in the wintertime. These cuts and these drains, as we talked about earlier, these creeks that come in, is really where I want to look for them. Now, when you start getting some warm days, especially into the late winter and early spring, you'll find these fish getting aggressive. Guys, one thing also to remember is water clarity dictates everything. I don't care what time of year it is. I want to know that more than anything else when I go to a lake, more than what they're biting, more than anything else. What's the water clarity? Because that's going to tell me they're going to be shallow related to targets, or they're going to be out, and I need to find them on these channels and really get the Navionics dialed in. It's going to be the big key. So, all right. Wintertime kind of goes quick. It's pretty, you know, here again on Tennessee River, Pickwick Lake. You know, one thing, you know, Smithsonian here that you see, there's a big major spring along the bluff area, just from there into the land there on the Lauderdale side. You know, underwater springs are another big thing that's important to fish. Looking at Mulberry Creek here on the south side, that's where Hackney won that FLW a few years ago, right there on that bar on the main river there. But yep, right in here. But you know, it's really relative to getting out of the current, trying to find the warmest water you can in the wintertime. and finding those drains and those cuts that those fish get back in. Guys, talking about shad spawn, oh my gosh, looking at just about 5 places right here on this map that you can go out and catch 25 pounds on right now. But just those high spots, Smithsonian, Mulberry, all of that, just really, really good. Really good stuff.
Cool.
All right. My little weenie dogs are barking outside. I apologize to you guys if y'all hear that. But hey, I tell you that, let's look at this photo right here. I ran in and was coming in. This is from the Lake Okeechobee wind. Y'all see that big bug splattered on the top of my nose there on that photo? Oh, I sat there and talked on Bass Live for 10 minutes at Mercer. He kind of got a towel and wiped that off of me. That's pretty funny seeing stuff like that. Just fun stuff. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's right after the Lake Okeechobee win last year. So, all right, we got any more questions, Tyler?
Yeah, we do. So we have Josh, and he wants to know how you set up on clear, smaller lakes with channels, but only light wind current.
All right. Yeah, good question. Again, we're going to take into the time of year, you know, a lot of the things we looked for, and you really just dial it back into, you know, into a smaller scenario. I grew up fishing farm ponds. My grandfather had a farm pond that I fished as a kid. And there were certain little stretches in those ponds that would be good during certain times of the year. And you can take an enormous lake like Gunnersville or Pickwick, and it can be so intimidating. But what I like to do is really break it down to a given area. And it's the same thing in a small lake. You know, I'm still going to look for those flats. I'm still going to look for steeper banks for certain times of the year. I'm still going to look for the cover or the drops and things like that. And really just and really get it dialed in and all of that, guys. And I'm gonna tell you too, getting out with your Navionics and actually graphing stuff yourself and recording it. If you haven't done that or seen that on some of your smaller lakes or even some of your bigger lakes, that's some of the coolest things to do. And I would take my time and do some of that on those bodies of water as well.
Yeah, just a follow up to that, you know, that's called Sonar Chart Live, but you can definitely map any lake if you have, you know, there's a lot of resources on YouTube, so look it up, but that's a good way to map something and basically create your own map.
Yeah, that's one of the coolest scenarios, you know, to be able to go out and do and to graph and mark your own stuff, guys, because when you see it and you're building your own map with that Sonar Chart Live, it's just, technology just blows me away, and what's happening with these electronics and with our mapping is just amazing. And get out and take advantage of it. And this is one thing, guys. It's funny when I'm doing seminars and I tell people, I said, don't be a guy. We're all sometimes we don't want to read instructions or read up on things. We just want to get out, put the product in, and use it, guys. This equipment will help you catch more fish than you can imagine by gaining confidence in how to use it. Research it, read up on it. When you get it downloaded, when you get it, put it into your units, learn everything about it, absorb it like a sponge, and you're going to find it's going to put a lot more fish in the boat for you.
Perfect. So we have another good question. How do you find shell beds? This is from Westwood.
Yeah, I think you have to learn how shell beds, where was the question from?
He didn't say.
Okay. Sometimes every place is different. Florida, they're a little different, but
actually, hold on. He followed it up. Pickwick Lake, Mississippi state line area.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. My home lake here. It's a pretty cool thing about Pickwick Lake. You've got Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee all in one lake. The biggest thing on finding those shells this time of year is knowing that it has to do with water temperature, and they're going to be shallower right now in that 5-foot range, and they'll move out deeper as you start getting into June. But you can actually see them on your graph. You can actually see them on your unit. It'll look like just a bunch of little round circles. And when you find them, they're really magical. They're really, really good.
We got Michael from Fort Loudon, Tennessee. He wants to know, is there a time that you focus more on the inside river bends versus the outside bends? Yeah,
really, really good question, Michael. We got a lot of guys from Tennessee River on here. But I think inside bends are pretty much dominate because they're going to be rockier. They're going to be, outside bends pretty much dominate. But inside bends can be really good too, especially when you get on places that get a lot of pressure and you go over there and you fish inside bends, especially when they create a good point and somebody's put brush piles out on them or cover on them. We were at Kerr Lake in North Carolina in the fall of the year, it seems like inside bends, especially late fall, can be really good. But for the most part, I like the outside bends, but inside bends can be good, especially in the fall of the year.
Perfect. And then Eric says, on the Potomac, what is the best tide to fish or your favorite tide to fish?
The best tide to fish is, to me, is the very end of an outgoing tide. I like that last hour of the outgoing tide. It's like the fish think, hey, I got to feed right now. It's going to be a while before we eat again. But and I also like it when the tide switches. My least favorite is a high tide. I like the last half of an outgoing tide is my absolute favorite. A lot of guys from Potomac and Chesapeake on here tonight. That's pretty cool.
Quite a few. Now we have one more. Doug and Kathleen. They're from Collierville, Tennessee. So they said Strike King country.
Yeah, it is.
They want to know about how deep in the drains you've actually caught bass. I guess the deepest you've caught bass in drains.
The deepest I've caught bass, and the deepest I've ever caught a bass was in 75 foot of water. That was a smallmouth on the St. Lawrence River. But the deepest I've ever caught them around here, and they're asking from Collierville, Tennessee.
Yeah, he's actually specifically like about the drains that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. The drains, I would say 20, 25 feet is about the deepest that you'll catch. I mean, the wintertime, if you go, they're not too far from Smith Lake or Bay Springs, some of the Clearwater lakes. They'll get a little deeper in the wintertime in 35, 40 foot of water. Table Rock, I've caught them, a lot deeper in the drains, but it's a clearer lake than what they have there around Collierville, Tennessee.
So John, he's from Gardendale, Alabama, and he wants to know, when fishing those tight contour lines and points, do you fish shallow to deep? And do you use crankbaits or jigs? And he also says War Eagle.
War Eagle, I love it. Hey, Gardendale, we're playing a school called Mortimer Jordan this weekend, my alma mater in the state playoffs in baseball. So he probably knows about that school. I like to fish. I like to keep my boat out shallow and fish, casting shallow and working it out deeper. Unless it's a really, really deep spot. That's just my preference. I don't like to get my boat too shallow, not wanting to spook the fish and things like that. And I fish crankbaits most of the time. I've designed the Z-Boss 20, the Z-Boss 10, all of that series of crankbaits, and they actually dominate here on the Tennessee River. It's the lure that, set the all-time record on Major League Fishing. But crankbaits are my favorite way to fish. I absolutely love them.
Okay, so we got one more question, and this is, it doesn't actually say who it's from, but he wants to know on the Wheeler map how the bass travel between winter to spawn and back to summer. And I just wanted to take a quick second on to tell everyone that on the Navionics website, if you just go to navionics.com, you can hit chart viewer on the top. That's where all these screenshots came from. This is a free way to check out the maps. So right now, this is Wheeler Lake.
And the question was from winter to, what was the question again, Tyler?
From winter to spawn and then back to summer, how they travel.
Guys, they will use the same contours to go out and come in year after year, and there will be certain sections that they're gonna set up on. This chart right here, I'm gonna say, a lot of these fish are going to winter out in the main channel, but a lot of them are also going to get into protected areas. Kind of the big areas that have the drains and the creeks that go up in there. They're going to get up in there, get out of the current slightly, and then they're going to spawn up in those areas when they move on up even further after the wintertime is over, and they're going to spawn. They're going to come out, and those channels are just like highways. That's what they're going to migrate out on. They're going to get at a certain depth and move all the way out until they get in that current. Wheeler Lake, which is the question we were asked about here, these bass, they're going to follow the threadfin shad, and the threadfin are going to come out in that current in the summertime. Rick Clunt said one time a bass is naturally a shallow water creature, and they are. They would never go deep if the shad didn't go deep. They're going to stay shallow, but that's where their forage goes. It goes out deep to get in that current where the high oxygen content is, and they're going to actually move out deeper. But exactly, we followed the cursor in. They're going to come right back out in the summertime and get out on these main ledges. So it's really a neat phenomenon. I think we get so caught up in what lure to use and what color to use. And guys, it is so important. I've seen so many times that a certain color works so much better than another color. But knowing these fish movements, and you can be the best angler in the world, the best caster in the world, using the right lure you should be using. If you're not throwing where the bass are, you're not going to catch them. And being able to take your navionics mapping and eliminating where you don't need to be, and knowing you're casting where you need to be is half the battle. And, I can tell you right now, you can just about take any lake we're going in Major League Fishing or on the Elite Series, and you can take the guys and they can go sit in their garage and look at their navionics mapping, and they can just about tell you before even going out and making a cast where those bass are going to be. And, you've got certain scenarios that are going to change that, from flooding to overcast days to sunny days and some different things. But for the most part, those guys can all go and show you that. And being able to know that before you even get out there really can make your days a lot more enjoyable on the water.
Perfect. And we got one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. It's about 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, someplace for some guys, and 8 o'clock for you. So Eric says, what time of year would you use the Z-Boss 25 to get deep bass? And he's talking about mid-Atlantic reservoirs.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, my favorite time is the summertime with that one, Eric. I know Randy Haynes developed that crankbait, and it's just a phenomenal crankbait. The cool thing about the Z-Boss series is how they dive to a maximum depths without so much pressure and everything. But it's a really, that would be the time of year that I would use it, would be the summertime. And we're coming up on that now. And if you live near some of those lakes that are clear, they're going to get out there really quickly.
Perfect. Well, I think we got all the questions. So again, thanks, Timmy, for, that was the same one. So thanks, Timmy, for taking time out to answer it and answer all these questions and help everyone out. Again, thanks to Bass Pro Shops for helping and sponsoring this event. And thanks everyone for the great questions.
Hey, thank you, Tyler. Thanks everybody for being patient with me getting on. Thanks for hanging in there.